Hey everyone, Corion, your witch in residence here, and today for my 100th episode, I am joined by Kamran Pasha, and we have decided that we are going to take the absolute last word on The Last Jedi. You know, now that we're moving into a new era of Star Wars, we're getting into what I would argue could be the second renaissance for Star Wars. I think it's important to look back and catalog the failures that went into the decline of Star Wars before we move forward, so that hopefully, as historians, we can remind people not to make the same mistakes as the past, right? And not repeat history. So, Cameron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to do this because it is to close this topic out. I mean, a lot has happened in the, what is it now? 6 years, 7 years, 7 years, almost 6.5 years. Yeah. 6.5 years since The Last Jedi came out. Oh, see, I'm falling on my. Yep. It's
so exciting, right?
It still agitates me. I fall off my chair. But no, it's been nearly 7 years, and it changed all of our lives. Here I am on YouTube talking about it, right? But it is time to put it to bed. And so I think the best way to do that is exactly what you're doing. Let's just analyze it objectively now, without the emotions. Just look at it from a storytelling point of view. That's what your channel specializes in. What lessons can we learn? I think this whole movie is a lesson in how not to write a script, right? I've said this in the classes that I've taught. I taught at Penn State last year, and then I've done seminars at other universities, weekend seminars, where I've taught my Pasha method of screenwriting, and I've used the example, consistently. The Last Jedi is the worst script ever written, and it is the exact opposite of what you need to be doing if you want to learn how to be a storyteller. And so I think here's a time for us to close that door by analyzing it.
Yeah, I mean, there have only been 2 movies in my lifetime that I've ever asked for a refund on, based on the fact that the movie was terrible. The Last Jedi was one, and Transformers 4 was the other.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Transformers 4 was pretty bad.
Right.
I do. Yeah. And so, yeah. And I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad you got your refund. I walked out of The Last Jedi numb, and I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I was up all night upset about it.
Well, I think all of us suffered, like, I don't know, the emotional and spiritual version of a concussion watching this movie. It was, I don't think you should have slept. I think the nightmares would have kept you from sleeping ever again if you had tried.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think it's important to kind of realize that, like, the difference actually between the really bad Michael Bay Transformers movies and this is that Transformers was not just an IP, but it had a following outside of the movies as the primary source. So we can recover
for years. That was kept. Transformers went on. No one thought about Transformers movies. People just enjoyed the Transformers.
Right. And it was able to recover even though the movies were bad, because nobody really minded that much, right? Because they realized, well, this is kind of ancillary canon. But with Star Wars, the movies are the central pillar to the whole
that's what
thing.
That's what introduced this to us. In many ways, Transformers, the cartoons and whatever, and we're just ads for these toys that we enjoyed as children, right? Whereas these movies created the toys that we enjoyed as children. It's the other way around.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of an important point to make, is that, you can make the argument of, well, it's only a movie. No, it's the central pillar to the entire franchise. And if you take this pillar out, the whole thing falls apart. And that's what we actually saw happen, right? Yeah. So, go ahead, please.
So let's break down. I hope we're able to do it all in one video. We may end up, because there's a lot to talk about, we may end up doing 2 videos. But we'll definitely at least set the foundations of the issue. And starting point for me is, Star Wars made me into a screenwriter and a storyteller as a child. I would take my Star Wars toys, my Luke Skywalker. I had a Luke Skywalker on Hoth. I had the Speeder Hoth, the orange. I had that, and I would make out my own movies with my toys, with my action figures, right? Very I would make out my versions of events that happened, my fan fiction, right? And here I am now, 30, 40 years later, professionally, this is what I do. and it was because of Star Wars. So it's very important for me because Star Wars the original trilogy so filled my heart and inspired and ignited my imagination that it transformed my life. And I'm sure that's true for billions of people. Now,
Yeah,
and
I
so
mean, for me, the concept of the Force, the
yeah,
concept of that kind of spiritual mixed with the magical almost.
mhm.
That's what inspired me to look deeper into spirituality too. So, I mean, this is a thing that affects people's lives,
Yeah.
and for the better.
Yeah, for the better. And so that's why we reacted so poorly to The Last Jedi. So let's get into it. Let me start about just the reactions as the scenes. I have never watched it again. I watched it twice. I watched the first time in shock. Second time I already purchased the second. I thought I was going to enjoy it, right? So I already
Yeah.
purchased the second. I watched it on Friday night premiere, and I walked out of it numb. And I had tickets for Saturday night. So I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe I didn't get the movie. Maybe I didn't understand it. Maybe I walked in with the wrong perceptions. So I'm going to I paid for my ticket. Unlike you, I didn't get a refund. I went in for a second time, and I walked out of it numb a second time, right? And then that was the last time I ever watched it, right? But it's burned. It's burned into my memory and consciousness, scene by scene. I can see it still.
Unfortunately, in order to prepare for this video, I
no.
actually sat down this morning
Oh
and
my
I
God.
watched it.
Oh my God.
So,
all right. Well, then you have more strength than I do, brother. I can't watch it again. It haunts me.
Yeah, it haunts us all, I think, really, right? And I mean, you can really actually start with the problems in the opening crawl almost.
Yeah.
Because the opening crawl is trying to set an epic stage for what is to come, but it's telling us a lot of things that happened with very little information on how that went down. Right? In the first 3 movies and like the prequel movies and the mainline movies, it gives us information of stuff that happened off screen, but it gives us the details, the nitty-gritty, the important salient facts.
That's all you need to know. I mean, all you need to know in the very first crawl is that there's an empire, there's a rebellion, and this princess has the plans to defeat the empire. And then you start off with 2 ships, a ship attacking another ship in space, right? But you know enough, right? Even with the prequels, episode 1, you start off with, okay, there's a trade war. All right, that's all I kind of need to know, right? There's a republic and there's a trade war, and we start off. And that's what you understand. You don't need, when you're confident, because these are based on the Flash Gordon serials that George Lucas saw as a kid, right?
Right.
And they just gave you here to start off because they did a little bit. They were shorts, and you start off with add Flash in his last episode, face Ming the Merciless, and that's all you needed to know. And then now into the next episode, and the fact that you have to start off throwing information out means you're already insecure that people aren't going to follow what's happening.
Right. And there's another piece that I noticed too. And now this might be because I grew up in a military family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the military unit my dad was a part of is the Governor General's Horse Guard of Canada.
Okay.
Their sister regiment is the Blues and Royals in the UK. Now, I know you spent a fair bit of time in the UK.
Yes.
Now, the Blues and Royals is the regiment where the royal family joins. Okay, it's the cavalry regiment that the royal family typically belongs to.
So Prince Harry would have been part of it.
Exactly, right? Okay. Princess Margaret actually part of it, right? Now, notice what I said there. Princess Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why? Because the tradition always goes your royal title, your rank, and your professional credentials in that order.
Okay.
The reason why the Blues and Royals are special is because they actually have a rule in the unit that you're only allowed to address people by their rank and their last name. That's it.
So no titles, no royal titles.
No titles are allowed of any kind. The doctor in the unit has to get used to the fact that they're going to be referred to as lieutenant. The priest in the unit has to get used to the fact that they're going to be referred to as lieutenant. Lieutenant, technically, right?
Yeah.
But so being General Leia Organa doesn't make sense. It's inherently wrong from step 1.
Well, because of that. And now, so with that said, already the problem with General Leia Organa is that they want to devalue what she was as the princess. She was already a general. I mean, she was in command of. I mean, she was one of the leaders of the rebellion. She was in the Senate. She's one of. I mean, they all answer to her. General, all the generals, on the base on Hoth answer to her. She's the boss. A general is a step down for her.
Right. The only person arguably higher up in the rebellion was Mon Mothma. And that's fine, right? Because, Mon Mothma was more of a political head, and Leia was effectively in charge of the military head.
She was a military. She'd been trained at Alderaan, and so she was a military strategist, right? Which we saw in her behavior and how she outsmarts people in the trilogy consistently on military levels, right? And so, but again, the critique that I had when I saw the general thing is, with General Leia, I mean, this was the whole problem with all of it. It was a problem with the whole sequel trilogy, not just The Last Jedi, is that the idea of the princess was devalued. And that's because it was seen as weak or feminine, but whereas little girls love to be princesses.
The reason I give Last Jedi some credit and I held out for it were these two key points. Okay. Yes, I am a recovering Last Jedi apologist. I know. So you shouldn't be surprised with how much I love Picard season 3 and how much my credibility is in the toilet now. That shouldn't surprise anybody. But I did. One, the whisper of the Jedi Code. As a KOTOR fan, that was really exciting for me because I thought, are we going to tie Rey into what I consider the greatest Star Wars era ever created? And are we going to bring Revan to the big screen? Because that's still the big brain move to do, John. Just saying. And then the other thing, we just casually start broaching on the subject of the military-industrial complex, pointing out that, this guy sold weapons to both the First Order and the Resistance. And and I was like,
that's interesting. That we'll get to that scene. That's an interesting idea that's worthy of exploring, just not the way it was explored.
Especially in Star Wars. It is like the MIC is like the perfect, if you really want to expose what they are, Star Wars is probably the best universe.
Right. But there's a way to do it.
Correct.
And this is where it failed. Now,
it's because it was a sticky note on the script.
Right.
Yeah, it was literally a sticky note on the script. But all right, so where we are in the discussion, PD, is we were just into the opening battle sequence. So Corian, go on.
Oh, good. So, we've just gotten started.
Yeah, well, so we managed to get to the point where what's left of this fleet jumps out. Okay, and Hux is basically like, don't worry, I got a way to track them through hyperspace or something along those lines.
Okay. I got one comment. Since I've now seen Masters of the Air.
Okay.
Right.
Oh my gosh, even the space bombers were slower than the B-17s. Like, what? That's all I'm going to say on that.
There was like a hamster on a wheel as their power plant, I think.
And the hamster on a wheel in the power plant of the writer's room. That's what that was. Actually, the hamster was like two-legged, struggling to.
So we finally jump out of this scene, and then we get what I would argue is probably one of the most ridiculous moments. And that's Finn waking up in the hospital and nobody being around. Even today, in a medical environment, there are monitors on people. And if somebody wakes up or does something unexpected, you better believe those monitors go off.
So this scene makes perfect sense if we're in the Civil War era. Because them being more lax about monitoring the stuff. Okay, this is a rogue element that's sponsored by the New Republic. So yes, Corio, you're 100% correct that the medical staff and standards, I would think it's a little bit.
So that brings me to the issue of where I suddenly started feeling my stomach turn. So I was already concerned for some of the issues I saw in the battle, right? But my stomach turned in this moment because I instinctively, as someone who's worked in the industry as a minority for 23 years, I guess it would have been less than 20, 7 years or 16 years at the time, a minority who had experienced my own negative experiences as that, I immediately said, this is racist. The entire sequence felt racist. This was turning Finn, a hero from the last movie, into a buffoon. The opening scene was Hollywood has a lot of, it's still stuck in a lot of that old 1930s blackface, coonery garbage of portraying black people as buffoons. And this felt like going backwards in time to some really disgusting stuff that wasn't funny back then. It was mean-spirited back then, and it was mean-spirited now. It was taking Finn, this black actor, very talented actor, right? Taking this character and having him walk around in this stupid,
leaking
with squirting
clear
stuff
suit
around, and no one cares about his life. And he's a hero that sacrificed himself in the last movie, right? I was disturbed. I said, this is racist. And I recognize the racism. It's the racism that I've endured, which is people who think they're progressives who are racist. The people. I mean, I don't think Mr. Ryan Johnson would certainly identify as a progressive, as a liberal, as a proud, moving mankind forward towards the future guy, right? And I was like, this is exactly the kind of unthinking, cheap racism that I've experienced from those people who think they're above it.
Well, even just if the way to fix that scene. Yeah, well, the way to fix that scene was simple. Have a droid there and go, easy, buddy. Everybody else is in the ship is in the middle of an evac. Let me catch you up.
I know it's retroactive, but I mean, what a perfect point for a Matt Berry bot. Just saying. Like there's your comic relief. Is Matt easy there? You've had quite the adventure, that would have been hilarious. But Cameron,
you had to care. You had to care enough about this world to know that droids, when we see Luke after his, surviving the Wampa attack, it's a droid taking care of him.
That's true.
If you cared enough about this world, medical droids are part of it.
They're basically,
they're basically ubiquitous, right? Like they're everywhere.
Cameron, you see that the thing is with making Finn into the, slapstick, token comic relief guy. The whole point of that was it was subverting your expectations. See, he's being extra ironic because he's not actually racist by being racist, and therefore, well, actually, I don't know how it works because that movie subverts itself into its own.
But this whole movie is filled with racism. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it when we're going to get to it because
coming from someone like you, that's not a small statement either.
Yeah, and I don't play the racism card. I'm pretty conservative politically. Yeah. I'm a follower of Malcolm X, who was all about find your own power. The man exists, but you have to find your own power and not worry about the man. I'm that guy, right? But sometimes a man really inserts himself into the situation. You got to deal with it, right? And this was this movie, and we'll see when we get to Rose Tico, another character that was treated through the eyes of Hollywood racism. It's really shocking, and it really upset me because none of these actors deserve this. They didn't deserve it.
No. I don't think any actor involved in this movie deserved what they got for this, right?
Not at all.
I mean, maybe the Porgs, but that's
well. But we if we saw after when the movie came out and we started, and I was shocked and I started going to YouTube to figure out, am I crazy that I hate this movie? And then I started finding YouTube videos within a couple of weeks of the movie coming out. They did interviews like on Entertainment Tonight or whatever with some of the cast. And you could tell the discomfort the cast had. Their body language, there was no enthusiasm in the interviews. They looked embarrassed. And I mean, and literally it was like, it was like, I think the actor who played General Hux, because they're all like, so what do you think of the movie? There's like silence amongst the cast. And finally the general actor from Hux who played Hux goes, it's okay. It's fine.
Greatest Star Wars ever made.
Yeah, they were all embarrassed because they knew they were all professionals. These are all top-notch actors. They knew when they read the script, this is garbage. This is garbage. They knew that.
And then we get what I would argue is
that was not smart.
And then we get what I would argue is like the gallant and Goofus of Star Wars villains, which is Snoke and Kylo Ren, right? Because the thing that made Vader and Palpatine work was Vader was stuck and tied in to Palpatine and couldn't get out.
Yeah, the only way he could stay alive was to get through the situation with this guy's his boss.
Right. In the prequel movies, we had, Palpatine pulling the strings, and we saw multiple times that he brought in minions, for lack of a better term, or lieutenants that were tied to him, were stuck with him, were part of the ideology. Snoke is doing everything in the scene where he meets with Kylo to try to, I don't know, piss him off further.
Yeah.
He's doing everything he can to intentionally distance himself, to intentionally provoke a fight with this character.
Which makes no sense from the Palpatine analogy, because Palpatine would always go out of his way. How are you, my friend? Together, we will rule the galaxy. You're my friend. You know, that's what
you're
he
my
always
ally.
Called.
You're
and you know, and I said you're looking for young Skywalker. It's not like your stupid son blew up the Death Star and screwed up my plan. It's always like, together we will bring him. I mean, this is us.
It's like, yes, there are problems, but we can fix them.
He knows this dude wants to kill him, right? So he's just got to keep him close.
Right. I mean, like, even take a look at Empire Strikes Back when we first see Palpatine, and he goes like, look, I'm sensing a problem here. What's going on? And he goes, well, I think it might be my son.
Yeah.
And Palpatine goes, okay, I get that, but you do know we have to kill him.
Right.
And Vader goes, well, maybe we don't have to. Mm-hmm. He's not that far along the path yet. And Palpatine goes, okay, let's try it. Right? Like, let's, you know, I'm a good enough manager to be able to say, I'm going to give you the chance. Yeah. But I'm making it clear that if you can't pull this off, he has to die.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, that's what a good leader does. He's keeping Vader happy. Right.
Right.
You know, because he knows, he's like, look, it's going to work out for me either way. Either this kid joins us or he dies, but I don't lose this guy I need.
Right. And Snoke seems to be just going out of his way to be like, ha, moron, you know, like, get going, puppy. That's not how you keep a lieutenant from, you know, engaging in some sort of coup d'etat, right?
Yeah. And it's again, somebody who doesn't understand human dynamics and power dynamics.
So what does Kylo do? He gets into a TIE fighter and by himself goes off and attacks a fleet. And again, we get another space combat scene where it's effectively one fighter versus ships that should outclass it by 1,000,000 times.
Okay, you know, something just came to me as you said this, something that I've never thought of before. But why are we having this multiple repeats of one starfighter against ships, right? This is how Rian Johnson sees himself. He's one man against against all of us. Yeah. That's what he sees himself. He's going to take us all down.
He's against the evil racists buzzword of the week. I can't even keep up with it because I started tuning out.
Yeah, but we are the mindless machines that one figure has to face.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've thought about writing a similar story myself in my own universe, but it's like at the same time, how many times are we gonna okay. It's not even how many times are we going to redo David and Goliath. It's how many times are we going to keep David exactly the same and just keep multiplying Goliath? Because it's like, oh, you know, one little tiny fighter against a sea of 1 trillion,
But even in that story, I've studied, actually my show Kings was about King David, right? So I've studied David quite extensively. But even in that story, added the original Star Wars, it was never one starfighter. It was one starfighter. It wasn't, Luke was never alone. He had the entire squadron. They all died. And he didn't blow up the Death Star by himself. Had Han not saved him, that's why they all get medals. Because had Han not blown those guys out of the way, Luke could have blown the ship. They were all heroes. It was never one man.
Exactly. That's it. And actually, I just recently watched episode 4. That was my Star Wars Day indulgence. And I'm going to have to do a video, probably do it on the TWB channel. I'm going to have to do a video analyzing the fighter battle because after watching Masters of the Air, I didn't realize that. You want to know the one reason that the Star Wars Death Star battle works so very well? Mm-hmm. It's boring.
Yeah. It goes on, and this guy you don't know about gets killed, and that guy you don't know about gets killed. Yeah.
Yes, but you care because you're invested in some of the people involved in the battle, and the comm chatter is so very professional and organized and like efficient. You don't even notice how just like that's what sells the whole situation. That's why it doesn't feel cheesy or like a kids movie. It feels legit because the actors are taking the movie seriously. They're doing the scene seriously. These scenes are written by adults.
Well, even just take a look in episode 4.
Yep.
The red leader actually goes, "All right, guys, cut the chatter. It's game time.
Stay focused," because that's real. And by the way, I was reading about how when an early cut of Star Wars that Lucas showed to Spielberg and Coppola and his friends, it was early cut. His wife was still editing it. They were still figuring it out. So he didn't have all the special effects. So for the cut, he inserted into that battle scene, he inserted clips from World War II movies, right?
Yeah.
Because he didn't have all the special effects yet for the attack on. So, and I think Coppola said, "I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening here." And Spielberg said, "This thing's going to be huge," because he got what the intention was in that moment. So
yeah. So
that
we have this.
Why it felt like Masters of the Air, but in space.
Yeah. By the way, my friend John Orloff wrote Masters of the Air, so he'll be happy to know you liked it.
Oh, we absolutely loved it. We reviewed it on the channel. We thought it was great.
Add that to the list.
I had to speak to my class.
Yeah.
I had to speak to my class last year. He's very proud of that. It took him a long time to get that made. He wrote Band of Brothers, and it took him decades to make this follow up.
Yeah. So, well, he should be proud, and that's another video we'll have to do.
So the ship loses its bridge.
Yeah.
And for some reason Akbar is killed off screen, which
is again offensive. Because I was excited to see Admiral Akbar. I hadn't seen him since Return of the Jedi, and I cared about him in Return of the Jedi. I really did. I didn't know this character before, and we loved him. And like, I still remember that the moments, like when the Executor, when Vader's Star Destroyer goes down and hits the Death Star, and they begin to realize we might win. We might win this thing. Akbar, the look of relief. Oh my God, we're gonna win.
Yeah. The look of relief on his face, even through the prosthetics.
Again, that was something that you could have actually left. Now, you want to know why? It actually makes the universe a little bit more believable. You don't do it to every single hero, but if some of them have that quick, seemingly senseless or quick death, it adds a layer of realism to it.
But then you acknowledge it. You could do that.
Right. That's
then you
true.
have someone say, in honor of Admiral Akbar, because that's also real. You don't have an admiral killed in a battle with no one acknowledging it. Right. That's not real. Right. General Patton dies. Someone's going to acknowledge it.
Hold on, though. At the same time, the Resistance chain of command seems to be stacked like an inverted diamond. I mean, it seems like everybody's a captain, commander, admiral. We don't actually talk to the enlisted force, I've noticed, in the Resistance. Maybe they don't even have enlisted. I don't know.
They do. They get put in potato sacks, apparently.
Well, okay, because I see where you're coming from. You're not wrong. Where's the pomp and circumstance for Admiral Akbar's death? Where's the we didn't even hang a wreath at any point.
You just mentioned him. We just mentioned him. We're doing this for Akbar. You just mentioned his name once in the movie. I mean, you don't even know, is he really dead? I didn't see him die, but he's never talked about. I guess he's dead.
Or credit him with the secret plan to scoot down to the moon or whatever.
Yeah, and we also learned.
My point is, we have a fleet of how many ships, and we replace. We already have Admiral Holdo on board in his tiny little fleet. That's what I'm saying. Okay, it seems like we have admirals that are disposable at the moment.
But again, what we now know after the movie is they interviewed the actor who played Admiral Akbar, right? And I was horrified because in his interview, he said he cried on the set because the crew was making fun of him. So who are these people that Rian Johnson hired? The crew was making fun of him and mocking his death. And he said he cried as he was being put in the prosthetic, that people around him were laughing at him. Who the hell hired this crew? Who are these people?
Who does that?
Star Wars fan?
Even if you're not a Star Wars fan, who does that in a workplace?
Yeah.
Right?
Why would you mock this? I mean, this guy's a legendary actor. Why would you mock him? Don't you have any respect for your elders? But they don't, obviously, on the set. The set was run by morons, right? I mean, all we've seen from the behind the scenes footage that they proudly put out there is Mark Hamill getting angry, Carrie Fisher getting angry. I mean, if the actors are being disrespected and they let that be released on a back to the behind the scenes, that shows the level of contempt.
Yeah. So we then get Leia flying through space using the Force in some sort of Mary Poppins moment.
Okay, so now, go ahead. You tell that. Now I'm going to explain the storytelling problem with that.
Well, I was actually going to go. So I've got two major issues with that. One, we never once have seen Leia use the Force before this moment.
Correct. There's no setup. There's a payoff without a setup.
Right. And two, having done the research I've done, again, we're getting survivability in space, right?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, at least the movie's consistent that there's apparently enough air in space in this to make things work for at least a little while.
We do hear sounds in space, so it's possible that a galaxy far, far away could actually have a
well, I mean, I think we all presume. No, but we presume as the audience, we presume two things in a science fiction movie. One is sound is there because we need sound effect for a movie to work. We know that the lasers are not actually making any sounds in space, and we go with it. There's some artificial gravity works somehow. We don't ask how it works. Otherwise you can't. You spend all your time dealing with that stuff, right? And we just want to get into the movie, and so we presume that the pew pew is not real. We're just doing it for our own enjoyment, right?
Right. There's a certain amount of hand wavium we're willing to put up with.
In our phrase, okay.
Yeah. But so now with regard to the further stupidity of that, to bring into the air issue. So literally people started laughing in the audience. People started laughing.
Yes.
When Leia started flying, people started burst out laughing in cynical laughter. You know, people got up in my audience and walked out at that moment. They walked out.
One instance.
Yes.
One instance where that would have stuck the landing. It still would have been a little shaky because I agree. That is, skip ahead real quick. The payoff should have come after the fact. And that is instead of Luke, Force Ghost confronting Kylo, maybe the story should have been Leia pulling out a lightsaber and dealing with Kylo. And that would have been a better story beyond Johnson's capabilities. But then we would have had a totally different, and then we could have turned out, Leia is Force trained and has been a Jedi the whole time. She just went back to being
and it's like the mother finally stopping her kid and
I hate when I write better sequels without even trying.
Oh, right, just wait, because I fixed the Luke issues in this movie, and I've got to
get to that. But on this issue of oxygen in space, right, of her flying back, again, showing the lack of the concern and the contempt for the audience that was when they. So she doesn't fly. She flies back to the wrecked ruin of the ship, and she's outside of the airlock. And so, how do you get her in? All we see is them opening the airlock, gases escaping, and we cut to her inside.
Just gonna move this over.
The moment you open this thing, they're all sucked out into space.
Consume product anyway. Yeah, exactly.
But that's the thing is he understood enough that when you open the airlock, you see gases start erupting. So there is a atmospheric pressure situation. He understood enough of that, but he didn't want to deal with how they got her in without blowing the atmosphere. So he just cut from that to her inside. That shows laziness. I mean, if she flew back in to some section where we saw that light that suggests there's the atmospheric force field we talked about, we understand that they pulled her in through a tractor beam through that. But to open the airlock and then not show that because it doesn't work is pure contempt for the audience.
That's it. So now we finally get to Luke's island, where we left off at the last movie where Rey is presenting Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber to Luke in this moment of, thank goodness I finally found you, the day is saved, and he tosses it over his shoulder. And we go through a series of Luke just trying to get this person to leave his island and him going about his life and ignoring her and whatnot. Look, I'm gonna fix this whole section of the movie right now. And it's actually very easy. And the fact that nobody did this is actually insulting. Hear me out on this.
Yes, okay. I want to just say, but what more appropriate scene for Kathleen Kennedy's handling of Star Wars than that moment where George Lucas hands her the lightsaber, and she just chucks it.
Well, that was intentional. It reflected, and I think Rian Johnson understood that's who his boss was. He's writing for his boss. He understood this made her happy. This whole garbage movie made her happy. And that scene reflected his boss's mindset.
That's it. Now, the problem Luke apparently has is he's realized that more or less that the Jedi are an inherently flawed philosophy. That, trying to be this, part of this universe kind of thing is just never going to work out. We don't get a deep dive into why it's never actually going to work out.
Yeah.
Here's what I would propose. Luke has now had a fair bit of time between when we've seen him last and now. He's apparently run an academy. What I would like to have seen happen is he's dug deep into the history of the Jedi, into the history of the Force and all of that, and realized something important. Every time the Jedi get involved in global or in galactic affairs to the point where they become a fighting force, calamity strikes. So his solution is, instead of being a knightly order, to become a monastic order.
Sure.
Right?
So like some of the Taoist monks.
Right.
Exactly. Old Kung Fu movies. They want to be left alone. They still have the abilities. You mess with them, it'll be your problem, but they're not out there looking for fights.
Right. They're no longer going to do that. They're going to focus on, their own internal spiritual practices and not, be involved in the world. And the rift between Kylo and him has to do with Luke wanted to pull away from the Republic, pull away from everybody else. They take over a planet of their own and study the Force and do what they were always supposed to do. And Kylo's like, no, we need to be a part of it. And that's ultimately what corrupts him. When he's got Rey, instead of, rejecting her and just basically saying like, no, we're not doing this or anything, he tries to bring her into this view of, no, we need to stay out of this because every time we get involved, bad things happen. And her arc should be about convincing him that you cannot internally balance yourself unless you're taking an active role in caring for those who you care about. You have to love, because that's part of the Jedi Order.
Sure.
And not allowing yourself love is really what defeats the Order. We could have had a deeply spiritual, philosophical discussion about being part of the world or sequestering yourself away from the world as a better solution for life. And we got robbed of it.
But because first of all, you're 100% correct in your analysis, both as a student of religion and a student of history. This is where religious traditions often divide. The historic issue in Christianity was that the early Christians were pacifists. I mean, P.D., I think you can support this, right? They were pacifists. They did not want to fight in the military. This was a problem for the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire, when soldiers, centurions converted to Christianity, they quit or they refused to fight. That's a problem for a military force, right? And so it is not surprising that when Constantine has his vision, it's in a battle, right? Because not only I'm not going to say whether Constantine really had a vision or not, that's a matter of faith, but the way it's presented, Constantine has his vision of the cross. With this side you will fight, with it will have victory in a battle. That was surprising in 4th century Christian culture because Christianity was perceived as a pacifist, detached from the world tradition, and now you have a warring emperor saying the Christian cross appeared to me to give me victory in battle, right? And so that part of Christianity is fighting for justice. That's a new idea, and one could argue whether that was good or bad for Christianity, but it certainly put it in the new historical direction.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. But there does need to be an understood difference that yes, while a lot of the early understandings were pacification, I mean that isn't entirely untrue. Jesus said with his own words, someone strikes you, you turn the other cheek. And it was a monastic tradition originally, largely. I personally, here's where I'm at with my own philosophy, and other people can agree or disagree. Sure. I agree that when it comes to a conquesting military force, I personally have an issue with that because I'm not interested in conquest. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. He
Sure.
who lives by conquesting actions going to die by such, and that'll be the the consequence of your act. That's what I believe Christ meant. When it comes to standing your ground, I believe that whatever you feel, if you feel you need to just turn yourself over to your assaulting force, that's great. That's your business. Me, I'm going out in fire and fury. I'm standing my ground. This is my domain. I have a right to exist and have ideas the same as all the other 8 billion humans. And I think that is very much and I think that's really a universally divine idea at this point.
Well, and you can find it within Christianity. When Jesus is arrested, Peter strikes out with a sword and cuts off the ear. Jesus heals the guy, right? But he doesn't want to fight. Have weapons. Right. The disciples have weapons to protect themselves. So you can make that argument. But again, bringing it back to Star Wars and The Last Jedi, that's a theological argument about the nature of the Force and how to use the Force correctly within the Jedi. Forget the Sith. Just within the Jedi, are we supposed to be active? Are we supposed to be passive? Are we supposed to be detached? Are we allowed to feel love? These are real issues, none of which Rian Johnson cared to understand.
Well, and I would even build off of Coriones, and this is something that I even started in my own Star Wars fan fiction stories, which if you guys have interest in checking out at some point, let me know. But one of the ideas I had for the Jedi was that part of the different, as Luke was quickly training more people in my timeline, the branches would get out, and as they splintered off, I wanted to have them like mirror some of the different faiths and mysticisms and ideologies. So you would come across like a Jedi sect that you would almost think would probably be, worshiping towards Mecca if they had one. You would find others that would probably be kind of more like the Buddhist monks, some like the more traditional Japanese samurai warrior and so forth. And so, that's more stuff and this is the reason why I'm bringing and getting in on this part of the discussion is because this is exactly the kind of passion that you guys are having, the realization of potential. That's exactly what I was feeling when it came to hearing the Jedi code whispered in the air, and that's what I saw with the military-industrial complex. So on top of this, like this is really sad. This really shows just how just how like there's just nothing there in Johnson's head, because we have already unpacked potential layers of story that this one movie could have embarked on, or at least started. Yeah. And that's what I was, that just makes me even more ridiculous.
Angry.
Now, we've barely scratched the surface, but I want to keep going for a little bit here.
Yeah, it's on your timing. Well, we can continue and do it another time. Maybe we can combine the videos.
We got a few more minutes, but the next thing I think we need to touch on is how dirty they did Kelly Marie Tran.
Yes.
Oh my God.
This is okay. For those who are unaware, who have just been exposed to Kelly Marie Tran through Star Wars, do not understand how absolutely beautiful, both internally and externally, this woman is. Yeah. Okay? When you read what she's actually said, you realize she's one of these people that is just a genuinely kind, decent, wonderful person who happens to have a face for Hollywood. Yeah. Right? And they put her in a potato sack and do everything they can with lighting and effects to make her look just ugly.
Make her. This is shocking because it takes effort she's a physically attractive woman. That's a beautiful woman, right? And to make her look like she's a pudgy, it was like the roly-poly. It was like
a Mr. Potato Head almost, right?
And so I'm going to go back. This was the other triggering point of my racism, because we can talk as well how now we're just talking about what they did to her physically, because they went to a lot of effort. It's like those things where Charlize Theron has to be made to look ugly, or Margot Robbie has to be made to look ugly in order to get an Oscar nomination. I think maybe that's what they thought they were trying to do, a beautiful woman in order to, I don't know what, but whatever. But we're just talking now about her appearances, because her character was done even worse. But let's just talk about appearances. Right. So I have long held and it's only strengthened with time, that the fundamental pathology of everything in Lucasfilm since Kathleen Kennedy took over is her need to project herself onto the screen in an idealized fashion. So even though she's Irish, she imagined herself to be a British noblewoman, a British elegant noblewoman from Pride and Prejudice. That's what she sees herself as. And so everything in Star Wars under her has British brunette women who are herself fantasizing actualization idea of herself as the lead. We have that in Rey. We have, if you look at every single what was
in
the
Solo, in Last
Solo,
in all of them.
All of them. Every single one of them has. You have Khaleesi, in Solo, right? In Rogue One, you have a beautiful British woman as fighting. Just all, even in Book of Boba Fett, the head people fighting, the biker gang that shows up is a British brunette woman, right? Imagine if Kamran Pasha took over a movie studio, and every single thing that movie studio produced had a short, bald Pakistani guy as the hero. I mean, imagine that. What would you think?
Hold on. Come on, Cameron. You just cast Samuel L. Jackson to play your role, and you're good.
That's fine, but whatever. But
everything is a bald Pakistani man.
Well, close enough, right? But But now to bring it to Rose Tico is an incredibly attractive. Kellyanne, she's a very attractive woman, right? So what do they have to do? You can't. Rian Johnson at least knows where his bread is buttered. This whole movie is a love letter to his boss, right? He knows you can't make someone outshine the beautiful British woman that the boss thinks she is. So you got to take this, and let's come get to some racial places. A lot of Western women are very threatened by the femininity of Asian women, right? They're very threatened by it because I just spent a week in Malaysia surrounded by stunning Malaysian women, right? And in the layovers, I had 12 hours each time in Seoul, Korea. I mean, Korea, I was like, I didn't want to leave the airport. I'm like, this is like supermodels everywhere. Just normal Korean women are like supermodels. And it's just crazy. And so there's a threat that some Western women have towards Asian women. So he uglied her down so she would not in any way be a threat to the boss's projection of herself in Rey. How offensive is that?
Yeah. Oh, and it gets worse, right? Because then we take a look at the character, right? I mean, the character is simping for a guy that more or less doesn't really realize she exists.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's simp number one. She's like the queen of lost causes. She's pursuing a man who doesn't want her to the point they don't even stop. They take it all the way where she forcibly kisses him and he's disgusted. I mean, I'm sure the actors knew when they were doing the scene. It was so stupid. You could tell neither of them wanted to do this kiss scene.
That was a creepy and unexpected, love kind of thing, especially in the post-Me Too era. What? This is the opposite of what we're supposed to be. We should be putting, healthy relationships and learning to be an adult and take no for an answer on screen. Not I'm girl and I want guy and I'm just
but again,
stereotype.
This is the racist projection of a boomer generation white woman who sees Asian women as a threat and then wants to make them, basically make them into this like childish, immature, like whatever she falsely understands anime to be, right, is projected on her. And then the same thing, then you give the boomer woman's understanding of the bad boy, where suddenly Rey is in love with the guy that killed her, father figure from the last movie, and he's walking around shirtless, right? So that's just a boomer woman projecting white girls like bad boys kind of thing. I mean, it's all nonsense, right? It's all weirdo nonsense. Rian Johnson's genius is he understood his boss. He knew her like on a deep subconscious level. It's like, this is gonna make her happy. She's gonna love this. He knew exactly who his audience was. She's gonna love this. This is going to be, that's why, Rian Johnson said proudly that he handed in that the movie is a first draft. You can tell because we're critiquing it. The script makes no sense. And he said he handed in a first draft and he was stunned when they said, we're going to film this, because he handed in exactly what the boss wanted, which was just paeans to her pathologies, which was every single scene.
Right. So then, and I guess the next one we have to talk about is the dynamic that is, Admiral Holdo and Poe Dameron, right? To give some ground here, just a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Poe should actually have been in the doghouse.
Oh yeah,
right?
totally.
He effectively did lead an insurrection. He did effectively mutiny against Leia
He
in that initial fight.
He basically did the equivalent of what would have gotten your AA guns in Britain turned on you as you're coming home. Like, that's how insubordinate. Like, it would have made sense to just take out the entire B-17 with how insubordinate he was by the end of that mission. Like, a slap on the face was getting, and a demotion was getting.
So the story problem originates from that. Makes no sense. That dynamic of Poe being insubordinate, but then,
that's also, that's like against the character that we just met in Farce Awakens.
Correct. Exactly. He's a loyal military guy. So, and then they double down with that by giving him a boss that looks absolutely creepy and weird that you wouldn't take orders from anyway. Right?
And more or less, and here's the thing. Let's set a little bit of a scene. You both are writers, so let me project an idea on you, okay? And see what you would do with this kind of scenario. There aren't a lot of fighter pilots left.
Right.
Okay. The person who's coming in to take charge doesn't, knows that this person has just recently been insubordinate, but otherwise has, always turned out to be pretty good. The problem is there isn't a lot of fighters left. Okay. Yeah. You don't know him really. He doesn't know you at all. Right. Wouldn't you put together a scene of, look, I'm not a big fan. You know nothing about me, but we're going to have to work together to make this work. So let's put the rest of it aside until we get through this crisis.
Sure.
Right? Does that not make reasonable writing sense?
Well, and it also makes reasonable military historical sense. So, like, we're talking about stuff that's happened in the Middle East. If you look at the 1948 war in Israel, right? There were many factions on the Zionist side that opposed each other, that didn't like each other, that joined forces because they had an external threat. So we had the Haganah, which would become the IDF, right?
Right.
And they had no choice but to ally with people that they hated, which were the Jewish terrorist groups, which were the Irgun and the Stern Gang combatants. They targeted civilians. They killed British ambassadors. They killed UN people. They blew up the King David Hotel. They killed Palestinian villagers. This was embarrassing for Israelis that didn't want to kill some civilians, right? But they had no choice but to work with these guys. And they said, we'll deal with you afterwards. They didn't really, because then they had to found a country, right? But they're like, we have to work together and we'll deal with our problems with each other later because we have because there's so few of us and we have this external situation.
Well, we even see that, and the funny part is, we even have parallels for this in previous movies. Yeah. In Rogue One, which I would argue is probably the best movie that KK was ever attached to. Mm-hmm. Maybe the second, right? We have Saul Guerrero's faction.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have Saul Guerrero's faction, and we have the rest of the Resistance, and the rest of the Resistance basically goes, look, we hate working with Saul because he's a jerk, but he's got credible intel here. Mm-hmm. So we have to work with them. Right? And they're willing to say, like, yeah, it's a compromise. It's some dark deeds we have to do, but we are stuck. And we acknowledge we're stuck and we have to move forward. Yeah. And arguably that would have happened under Leia's guidance.
Yeah.
Right?
I like how they did exactly what you said, Corione. That conversation actually did happen, sort of, in Andor. I also like how we introduced Luthen, who was basically Saw, but in, political, I'm working in Coruscant version, and you're, on the ground getting your hands dirty, and they're both two sides of the same shitty coin, and yet even they realized, well, it's better that we work together to, and yeah, it sucks. Some of our guys have to get sold out, but, you gotta...
Yeah.
Gotta sacrifice soldiers to make victories.
Yeah.
All right. Even the French Resistance had to do that with some of its more aggressive factions, right? Yeah. Where they had to sit there going like, yeah, look, we don't necessarily get along, but we all agree the Germans have got to go. So we're going to get this done.
Look, there's
right?
some wisdom into using the wind-up toys, and pointing them in the direction of proper wind-up operations now.
All right. So the fact that instead the logic was something like, yeah, you were just, really overzealous and screwed around. And instead of letting you take your lumps and then we move on, I'm going to hold it over you and play around and make moves that intentionally make you not trust me
in front of everybody else, so that nobody else that trusts you doesn't trust me either.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, because she's clearly a nobody admiral. And actually, this is the part they inadvertently got correct. Because I have seen this happen. I've seen this happen because, I did some time in the actual U.S. military on board a ship. And so I've been in those situations where, like, either the new captain or commander, or we get the temporary guy that comes in and changes things. And you're like, this is not how we do it. Well, this is my command now. Oh, okay. Thanks, Jellicoe. Of course, I ended up having respect for Captain Jellicoe later on in my career. But the point is, they got that part, the tension and the new guy coming in and not knowing how to do things. They got that part right. But they didn't get the fact that they have their arguments in front of people. You don't ever.
No, it's setting up more mutinous scenarios, right? And I think the only other thing that I think we really have to touch on, because I think we've covered a lot, like we really need to hit, is the whole Canto Bite thing.
Sure.
Because everything that happened in that was completely needless, right?
Yeah.
We could have had a very good discussion about the military-industrial complex,
Sure.
and how the military-industrial complex doesn't care who fights so long as the fighting continues.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing new in that. I mean, Sun Tzu said this. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, one of the advice he gives to the emperor, because the whole book's advice to the emperor, why not to go to war, right? But one of the advice he gives is the reason you don't want a shooting war, you don't want a fighting war, is because the moment the battle begins, is the makers of the shields and the makers of the spears and the swords will become economically invested in making more of them. And then they will not permit you to end the battle when you need it to. So that is why you need to follow my strategies so that you defeat your enemy without fighting. Because once the fight begins, the military industrial complex is incentivized to keep fighting even when it doesn't make sense because they're making money on it, right? And actually now, speaking of Asian philosophy on war, that actually brings, I want to tie in something that shows how poorly they did this Admiral Holdo thing, right? Because have either of you gentlemen watched Shogun, the most recent version?
Yes.
Okay,
we
so
reviewed
incredible, best thing on TV right now, right? If you have people are watching, go watch it on FX. It's incredible.
Yeah, 24 is off to a great start for television.
Yeah. So Shogun, without revealing all of, there's so many twists in Shogun, but the main character who is the Shogun to be, right? The Japanese feudal leader who is opposing the other feudal leaders and is setting up a civil war. As we will discover over the course of the show, of the miniseries, he has a plan, and this plan is very complex. It requires a lot of losses on his side that he's willing to take, and importantly, the people who are being asked to make the losses are willing to do because they share his vision of the future of Japan, right? And so you understand, and there's people that are resenting his behavior because they don't understand why he's doing what he's doing. They don't get it, right? They do not get it. And however, because Japan has this strong culture of respect, they won't stand up to him. They'll grumble about it privately, but they won't stand up to him. It actually takes the British sailor to speak their minds and confront him because he doesn't know the plan. He doesn't know what's going on, but he just sees the Shogun apparently betraying his own people, right? That's what he thinks is happening, right? Through incompetence and cowardice. And he confronts him. And he shut up because, first of all, shut up, foreigner. You don't know what's going on. It's not your country. You know what's going on here, right? But in the end, he has our hero will apologize when he understands the truth of it, right? That's the reality situation. The soldiers did not rebel against the shogun. They privately grumbled as soldiers, as you know, having been a sailor. Sailors grumble about the bosses, but they obey. they obey, right? They'll grumble and they'll go to their death grumbling, I don't like this, right? I don't know why we're doing it, but they'll do it, right? That's real, right? And it's so that wasn't real. But Shogun showed how that really happens.
Yeah. And I think we lost out on so many opportunities, right? Like we have a situation where there's a group of slaves, and instead of freeing the slaves, they free the horses that are just going to get recaptured, right? Like, I guess we're putting animals above people's lives now.
I mean, it was some weirdo animal rights thing. It was a weird, it made again, it made her look like a moron. It made, her character look like a moron when she has her friends' lives are at stake. They have to get back to their ship with the guy that saved their lives.
But wait, let's appease PETA.
Right. And really the whole Canto Bight section feels like we're going to shotgun current social issues.
Yeah.
It also feels like we could have taken place on Narshada, but that would require paying royalties and using an originally established location well within lore, and now we can't have that.
Yeah. All right, now, guys, I do have to apologize. So we are going to cut the video here for now, but we are going to do a part 2.
Yeah, let's do part 2, and maybe we edit it into one larger video rather than release them separately. You do what you think is best.
I think what we're going to do is I'm probably going to do a part 1, and then a couple of days later release the part 2.